The candidates on stage with me at this segment of the evening are Ms. Donnelly, candidate for the 47th State House District. Her opponent is not here tonight, unfortunately, cannot make it. And then Mr. Espinosa and Mr. Ryan, the two candidates for the 139th State House District. There will not be any opening statements as such. As usual, we have drawn for order of answer. On the first question, Mr. Ryan will get the first answer, Ms. Donnelly will get the second, and Mr. Espinosa will get the third. On the second question, Ms. Donnelly will go first, then Mr. Espinosa and Mr. Ryan. On the third question, Mr. Espinosa goes first, then Mr. Ryan and Ms. Donnelly, and so forth, and we will rotate around. That having been said, we start. To Mr. Ryan first, can you describe what measures you will take as an elected official to ensure that each family has adequate resources and technology to continue their children's education?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here this evening. Thanks to the NAACP and the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to discuss the issues with you, and appreciate the students being here as well to be part of this event. I think we've seen that there have been made many efforts to be able to provide students with the technology that they require to be able to do the kind of work that they need to do in school. I think unfortunately, we've seen some issues with the Wi-Fi in certain regions, in certain areas of the region. I know we've talked about getting hotspots for those regions so people have accessibility to the Wi-Fi that they require to be able to effectively use the technology they have. I think it was a little disappointing to see that despite the efforts to provide students with the laptops, and other instruments that they could use, that there were points where about 5,000 students I know in the state did not actually even access their the technology they did have, which was, and then therefore didn't participate in the educational process that was being made available to them as they were being taught remotely. I know I'm currently teaching a hybrid class myself at the college level. It is a difficult process. You're not always sure how engaged the students are, but it's really disheartening to see that even with the technology provided, that there is people who are not able to do it.
All right. Same question to Ms. Donnelly.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and the NAACP Youth Council and NFA Debate Club. I appreciate this opportunity to be here. I think I think the school systems in the state of Connecticut are doing a very good job under very bad circumstances. And I know teachers and principals and superintendents and Board of Ed have been working very hard to make sure that students have everything they need. And teachers have dedicated a lot of extra hours to that effort. I think it comes down to funding. I think that the state of Connecticut needs to provide adequate funding for every school system, regardless of where it is. There should be equity in education, and school systems that cannot afford the PPE and all the things necessary to keep their schools open need to have those materials provided to them. Also, in terms, I think broadband is a really big issue. It's one thing to give Chromebooks to everybody or laptops to everybody, but making sure that everybody has access to broadband or setting up temporary hotspots until that can happen is essential. And I believe very strongly that students should be able to choose if they want to stay, if they have to stay home, or if they want to do virtual learning. And I think that we have to make sure that they have every tool that they need.
Okay, same question, Mr. Espinosa.
Well, first off, I want to thank the NAACP, the League of Women Voters, and the NFA debate team. It's great to see our generation here present, whether it's on this side of the stage or on the other. And as for the question, I will sort of echo off of what Mr. Ryan said. It is unfortunate to see the 5,000 students not participating in it or enrolled. Quite frankly, I think with the district, we have a town like Basra, it's very rural. We need to make sure we have those hotspots set up in place Now, again, we also need to note that this is the first time we've had to encounter this kind of bad situation, and it is a learning process, and we must be dedicated because education is and it always should be, a top priority. That is the future of our country, of our state, and of our community, is education, educating the young people, educating anybody that wants to go out and learn something. Learning is important, and I will always look into, if elected, other ways and newer ways to make sure that we can get everybody on board and learning. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have anything they want to say further on this question?
I think that we're looking for the federal government to provide the assistance that states need to be able to fund these efforts. And I think this election is very, very important coming up, and I think if we have the result I'm hoping for, that we should see some money needed coming to the states and filtering down to our school systems.
Okay, anything further? Thank you all. Next question will go to Ms. Donnelly first. The Connecticut State Universities and colleges are currently in a major budget crisis this year. How would you support a level of future funding for public 2- and 4-year state colleges and universities that will make the costs of tuition and housing affordable for current high school students to attend?
I think it's very important that the state of Connecticut work towards free community colleges for all students who want to attend. I think that we need to work towards free universities. I don't think that can happen immediately, but I think it's absolutely essential that we go that route. I think it's the inequity of people not receiving education because they can't afford it is just tragic, and the problems of high student loans are equally tragic. I think that is a very important thing to happen, and right now I think that we need to, the universities are cutting a lot of things, and I think from what I've seen, they're cutting probably some of the less essential things, but I think that we can't let them have to cut too much. They need to be able to provide the education that students deserve. So again, I think it comes down to funding, and I think that we need to find that funding for universities and colleges.
Okay, Mr. Espinosa, same question?
Well, I do agree somewhat with Ms. Donnelly on the question at hand, and quite frankly, we can't just go ahead and do it right away. If we were to start, we would have to look at maybe getting something out of the Coronavirus Relief Fund or something of that nature to get it boosted. We have a lot fiscally on our hands as a state already. Going full-fledged into free community college would be a harder task. I will say for those interested in me being in the National Guard, if you do enlist, you do get free state college, and also you have a GI Bill, and if you do not use that GI Bill, you have what's called a post-GI Bill for your children. And it's something that we need more R&D for, research and development, for free community college, and a path to that without 20 years from now putting ourselves in the hole pretty bad. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ryan.
Yes, obviously one of the great effects of the COVID virus is the fact that so many students had to leave the campuses of the state universities and the private universities, and unfortunately that reduced the resources that the schools were receiving, some of the money they were getting from students paying for their room and board, in addition to whatever other fees they might be paying while they were on campus. So obviously the state universities have had this lack of resources, decrease in funding that's adversely affecting them. I know that we were in the process of implementing free community college, because nowadays with the cost of college, it's not unusual for a person to attend a community college for their first 2 years of higher education and then move on to another college, because the community colleges were able to be affordable for most families. So that's really going to be a loss, and hopefully as we come out of the pandemic, we'll be able to re-implement that plan and look forward to that in the future. Again, Representative Donnelly mentioned the COVID funding that we should be getting from the federal government. That will go a long way to helping these issues. We also have an issue with UConn, and because of the COVID virus and healthcare costs in general, they are burdened as well by the UConn Health Center in Farmington. That's also put them into a dire financial straits. It's something that we also have to be addressing on both issues, the educational issue as well as the healthcare issue.
Okay, thank you all. Does anybody have anything they wish to say in rebuttal or extension? All right. Next question will go to Mr. Espinosa first. In 2019, the Connecticut legislature passed Public Act 1912 with overwhelming bipartisan support. The law requires school districts to offer an optional course on Black and Latino studies at the high school level. What are your thoughts on making this course mandatory and to expand it to be offered to all grades as opposed to just high schools?
Well, I liked what happened in 2019. Obviously, it actually helps bridge cultures, learning about people of color and the backgrounds of them. And also, we should include Native Americans, since we do have big we have the tribes over here in southeastern Connecticut. That plays an important role into what goes on around southeastern Connecticut, and then the families that are still here from those tribes and the tribes. Also, when you mandating it for younger or earlier grades, I guess you say, it does make it easier in the learning process, because a student or a young child's brain is like a sponge, and they absorb, they learn a lot. And I would look into something like that, of that nature, to be able to make that more accessible for younger students in earlier grades, to be able to attain this knowledge and learn about all these decent cultures and backgrounds. Thank you.
Okay. Same question, Mr. Ryan?
Yes, obviously this is a bill that I supported. I think it's a very important bill. And as we talk about systemic racism in the current environment that we have in this state and this country, I think education is one of the components that we're going to need to address that issue. And the more education, the more people can learn about each other, I think will go a long way to addressing that problem that we have in this country, by making people more aware of other races, other cultures within our country, so that they can be more able to communicate with folks that they probably are not incredibly familiar with in a lot of ways, and that's unfortunate. And a bill like this kind of education would go a long way to helping with that. I heard Senator Austin mention earlier the fact that in this region, it's important to us because we have the indigenous tribes that are so important to the region, who are members of our families, members of our community. And I know we learn a lot about them because we're here. I think it would be a benefit for the rest of the state to be able to know what we know. And that could also be a really good additional element to this education that hopefully will occur in the future.
Okay, Ms. Donnelly?
Yeah, I think it should be mandated from pre-K into university. It's absolutely essential in order to work on the issue of systemic racism in our culture. And we have to begin with children. And if it's just optional, communities more likely communities with lots of people of color will have it, and communities that don't have many people of color will not. That's not totally 100% the way it will go, but I fear that desperately. I think that we need to really start attacking systemic racism at the root causes. Children need to know the history of our country in a real and authentic way, not just the history of the white community. And I believe that it's an essential thing to do. I think it was a good first step, but I think we need to make sure that it becomes a very vital part of our curriculum. So many of our textbooks are from states with a very deep roots in racism and slavery, and I think that we need to be more careful about what we're teaching our children. And we need to not only understand the history of Black and Latino people, but we need to understand the oppression that they survived and they still struggle against today.
Okay, anything further on this question?
Yes, I can't help but remember when we going back a while to when we tried to make Martin Luther King Day a holiday. Many of the towns in the state embraced the idea and did it on their own. And unfortunately, some communities held out to make Martin Luther King Day a holiday within their towns. So I think it's kind of an important thing that maybe we do have to mandate it, because to ensure that it does happen and that all the children have an equitable education in that regard.
Okay, Mr. Espinosa or Ms. Ryan, anything further?
No.
Okay, next question goes to Mr. Ryan first. In 2014, there was a statewide referendum called the Connecticut Early Voting Amendment to allow for early voting. It did not pass. As a result of COVID-19 and its impact on in-person voting, do you think the legislature should re-examine this decision and submit or resubmit a similar ballot referendum to the public?
Well, I obviously have supported it when it has been before the General Assembly. I think it's an important bill, and it's made even more current because of what the pandemic we're going through now. But there were a lot of other reasons before the pandemic. People's schedules are very busy. Picking one day during the year where people are supposed to be made available to be able to vote. People have work schedules, have family schedules. So I think making it easier for people to vote is important to ensure that they do vote, that they become part of our democracy, that their voices are heard. And I think a bill like this is very important in that regard. And hopefully we're going to see it again, and we'll be able to implement it in upcoming session. Not implement it, but put it on, be able to get it on the ballot so we can get it implemented in the upcoming next election.
Okay, Ms. Donnelly?
I agree completely. I think that we need to have, people should be able to vote early. We should have same-day registration as a regular matter in all communities. I think it's essential, and we see, I mean, COVID brings it out perfectly. We all watch the news and see lines and lines and lines, and I fear that will happen in Connecticut, and I'm very thankful that that during COVID that we're able to check that box off that says not voting in person because of COVID, because many times previous to that, I remember not being sure if I'm going to be in town on election day. Sometimes I was, sometimes I wasn't. Was I working that day or not? And if I did an absentee ballot and I wasn't him, I was violating a law. How absurd is that? Right. So I think that we have to make sure that everybody can vote early, and everyone can vote absentee without a reason of being out of town or other things like that. So yes, I think it's essential. We're seeing such a vast movement of voter suppression happening in our country right now. It's just such a disservice to all of our ancestors and all the people who fought very hard to get the vote. And I think here in Connecticut, it's just, we can do it. We can put that on the ballot and make sure that we have that ability.
Okay, Mr. Espinosa.
I'd actually support early voting as well. It does make it easier, and it's especially for people that work on election day, might be out of town, emergency might come up, or they just simply forget because the polls are only open from 6 to 8. It's the only concern I'd have, and which I know would be brought up in the legislature, is currently how we have the ballot boxes. Some of them aren't really so secure, and I know other people have had some worries about this. So when it comes up in the legislature, I would look into seeing if we could put these ballot boxes or drop boxes within a more secure area, like inside the city hall or in other facilities. So it's not as just sitting outside and somebody decides to throw a match in there in the middle of the day, or just decide to hit it and take it or something like that, of that nature, just to cause havoc. Thank you.
Okay, anything further on this question?
And just to say, the drop boxes should all be accessible. They are not in every town. They're accessible for people who have disabilities.
Okay, anything further? All right.
I think I just want to note that I know people are concerned about the security, but the fact is you want the boxes to be accessible at any time. So if you put them in somewhere where the town hall happens to be closed, and that's the only time a person can go by, is when the town hall is closed, you want to be able to have the boxes available so that they can be able to drop off their ballots any time of the day and night that's convenient to them.
Yes, Mr. Espinosa.
Well, with early voting, it gives you plenty of time to get to a secure location where you can securely drop off your ballot during the time of day. And quite frankly, we haven't even examined and done enough research and development into looking into where we could secure these ballot drop boxes. For now, because we were in the middle of a pandemic and it was very rushed, we had to place them somewhere. I know we have at least 3 in Norwich that I know of. There's a few in Montville as well, and it's just something that should be looked into.
Okay, thank you all three. Next question goes to Ms. Donnelly first. Ms. Barrett is now a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Connecticut already has a reproductive rights law. However, given that Roe v. Wade may be weakened or reversed, should Connecticut's law be modified? If so, in what way?
I think that we have a good law in Connecticut. I'm very happy to say. I think that it was a disgrace that she was voted on so quickly without an opportunity for the full Senate to really do the work that needed to be done, as well as the fact that we're a week before an election. But having said that, I think we're in fairly good shape in the state of Connecticut, thanks to many forward-thinking people. Our law was before Roe versus Wade decision. So I think that it's absolutely essential for all of us, not just women, to fight to keep our reproductive freedom. It's absolutely essential, and it's a fundamental right, and I think that, we need to struggle. We need to be ever vigilant in Connecticut, and we need to make sure that our organizations like Planned Parenthood and Naacp are well-funded and have the opportunity to provide the services that they need. So I don't really know if there's any minor things in the law that should be changed, but it's certainly something I'll look into if I'm elected.
Okay, Mr. Espinosa?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Ms. Barrett is now a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Connecticut already has a reproductive rights law. Given, however, that Roe v. Wade may be weakened or reversed, should Connecticut's law be modified, and if so, in what way?
Okay, thank you. Well, since it's codified by law in the state of Connecticut and also with Roe v. Wade, I don't think it would necessarily have to be modified. Planned Parenthood is an organization that does a lot more than just abortions. My girlfriend had to go to Planned Parenthood for other things, and I experienced firsthand how good these organizations and facilities are. I think what we have in Connecticut is working quite well. We could look into possibly making things a little bit better. As far as the justice of the Supreme Court, the new justice of the Supreme Court, Amy Barrett, that was a federal issue. It happened on a federal level. Won't be able to say or do much as a state house representative. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Ryan.
Yes, I think in anticipation of what women, actually, women's members of the General Assembly who were women, kind of anticipated some changes might be occurring 2 years ago, as we saw the powers to be come to fruition at the federal level. So they suggested and proposed certain legislation to kind of tighten things up at the state level that would ensure that their rights were upheld should there be any changes at the federal level. So I think we did that 2 years ago. I think there probably might be more things that can be done, but I know this was something that the Women's Caucus did foresee. I'd love to take credit of it as a man, but it was the women who did come forward with this, not surprisingly, who felt that their rights had to be maintained and could see something happening, which did happen, to change laws at the federal level that would infringe upon their rights. So that they did what they could at the time to ensure that their rights were maintained and would be upheld no matter what changed at the federal level.
Okay, anything further on this question?
No, just to say, most people in the United States believe in reproductive freedom, have a high preponderance of them, and let's hope that there aren't dramatic changes to Roe versus Wade.
Okay. All right, anything further? All right, next question goes to Mr. Espinosa first. Would you support efforts to mitigate the effects of climate change in southeastern Connecticut? Would you support, for instance, a change from fossil fuels to renewables?
Well, we got to look into that a little bit more, and so I understand the concept, and I do support the concept. However, there needs to be some more research, and I personally need to look into the question and look into the information behind it a little bit more for that. I do believe in climate change. In southeastern Connecticut, I know since we aren't as a pact of a section of Connecticut as opposed to the western side of Connecticut, it's something that can be effective, especially with solar panels and using renewable energy. And it's something that I'd have to look into a little bit more. and thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ryan?
Obviously, I teach science at a college level, so I have a lot of faith in scientists in regards to climate change and what they've been telling us. I'm also a member of the Environment Committee in the General Assembly, and these are issues that I think, when you say southeastern Connecticut, it's going to affect the whole state, the whole country. So we've been addressing the needs that we need to have and things we need to implement to ensure that our environment is kept safe. And I would certainly work to ensure that issues dealing with climate change, as we've seen so many radical changes in the weather just in this last year in addition to the pandemic, that we need to address these issues, and we can do it in a variety of different ways, dealing with how we produce our energy. We've had some talk about nuclear energy since we have Millstone in our region, and looking at that as possibly a renewable energy source. Some people might not always agree with that, but looking at other elements, I know Basel, for example, has a huge solar farm. There's another solar farm, a couple of solar farms here in Norwich, which are going to be important to trying to wean us off fossil fuels, to ensure that we can still provide the quality of life we've become accustomed to because of the energy that these systems provide us. And that's going to be important, and we have to help them in that regard.
Okay, Ms. Donnelly?
Yeah, make no mistake about it, climate change is here. It's affecting our climate, it's affecting the fires in California, it's affecting our district here, District 47. In my town, many people's wells have run dry. There are refugees coming in because of climate change. We need to take action now. R&D, we've got the technology. The technology exists today, absolutely, for solar, renewable energy, battery storage, wind power, it's there. And we need to make our buildings more efficient. The best energy is the energy that you can save and not use. So I think we're ready. We have to do it. We have to do it now. We can't mess around with this. We've been talking about it for years. It's happening. I think that the first thing that we need to do is stop the Killingly fracked gas plant. We have to stop fracked gas plants in Connecticut, and we have to work towards renewable energy. There's any number of things that we can do. Shared solar is an excellent example. Taking the cap off the virtual net metering for towns to invest. Many towns are doing their own solar farms. We have offshore wind happening in New London. There's offshore wind happening all over the Northeast. One of the reasons I'm running for the state legislature is because I want on the Energy and Technology Committee and I want on the Environment Committee, because I feel very, very strongly about this. If we are to survive as a planet, yeah.
Okay. You may be able to extend on the next
Okay.
go-round. Is there anybody else who wants to extend or rebut on this question?
I just want to make one additional comment while we talk about climate change. One of the elements we forget is we implement those elements that would help us with climate change are the jobs that they would produce. As we do develop these wind farms, turbines, the solar energy, it also produces and helps our economy with this new type of green energy, and that's going to be important to this region as we come out of the pandemic.
Okay, Mr. Espinosa, anything further?
No.
Okay, Ms. Donnelly?
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of the Green New Deal. I think it solves this problem. It solves many problems, one of climate change, but also of the problem of jobs. And I think that we have the possibility of building infrastructure, upgrading our grid, building renewable energy. Energy efficiency takes jobs. They're not jobs that can be exported to China. They're jobs that have to happen here in our buildings, in our homes. So there's so much we can do, and I am very enthusiastic about it.
Okay, thank you all very much on this one. Next question goes to Mr. Ryan first. What plans would you recommend to introduce rapid COVID testing in Eastern Connecticut? And can the legislature do anything to ensure that the vaccine will be affordable and accessible to everyone when it comes out?
Well, it's funny, I had a COVID test today. So this is the third one I've had. I've had to have one before I could go on campus to be able to teach a couple of months ago. I think it's important. I have a little concern about the rapid test insofar as their reliability. There's been a lot of false positives, and I think I would be more comfortable addressing that issue to assure that people are getting the right results when they take that test. But again, it's important because people want to know right away whether they've been affected by the virus, so that they could deal with whatever issues they may have to deal with as far as their health is concerned. Again, I think, like, for example, we've been very fortunate that a lot of the local service agencies have been providing these tests for free, so the cost isn't a big issue at the moment. But as we move forward, I think it's going to probably have to be addressed, and hopefully we can help us at that regard. And again, with the vaccine, I know I have always gotten a flu shot. I once, so many years ago, had a very bad case of the flu, so every year, because of also the exposure I have to a lot of people, always got a flu shot, and it's worked well for me. So I'm very comfortable getting a vaccine, though I can understand why some people might be a little hesitant, because it is new, and you want to make sure it works and it doesn't have any deleterious effects on yourself. So I cautiously look at it, but certainly we can work on making sure that it's available to everyone.
Okay, Ms. Donnelly.
Yeah, I have the same concerns about the rapid tests. I think that the false negatives are very problematic. So I think that, I hear that new testing is coming out, which will be faster and better. So I look forward to that and making sure that I think Connecticut's done a pretty good job, actually, of making sure that people can get tested. And also making sure that they're not being charged for it. So I do support the governor's effort and the fact that our health departments throughout the state are on top of this. I feel good. I feel like that, not that as a nation we're on top of it, but I feel like the state of Connecticut is doing a decent job. And I trust that when a vaccine is developed that is effective, that we will be able to move it out quickly to the people.
Okay, Mr. Espinosa?
Well, so we already do have rapid testing over here. I do agree there have been quite a few numbers of false positives, so we need to make the tests, the effective rate higher, or the efficiency rate, I should say, higher. I will say when it comes to the flu vaccine, being a National Guard, you have to take it. It does not work well with my body. I usually get a lot of muscle fatigue and sometimes even bedridden for a few days. I knew a few other members of the Air Guard that had the same situation. My grandfather had flu shots and still passed away, unfortunately, of the flu a few years ago. So when it comes to the coronavirus vaccine, it is new. People will be worried. And quite frankly, everybody's different, and their bodies will take it differently. I don't think mandatory vaccination for the coronavirus vaccine is the way to go. Even with, like I mentioned earlier, the long development of the flu vaccine, we still have some people that their bodies can't handle it just quite yet.
Okay, anything further on this question? All right, I'm going to ask a follow-up question. It's going to start with Ms. Donnelly. Should the legislature abolish the religious exemption to otherwise required vaccinations?
Should the legislature abolish? I believe it has abolished it. It's not. The religious exemption's still there. Okay, sorry. I think that we have to look at the statutes. I think we have to make sure that people who need medical exemptions can get them for real medical issues. I think that there seems to be some concerns that that's not the case, that people with medical exemptions cannot get them when they need them. And I do think we should abolish the religious exemption. I think that it's become a place that people go when they don't want to have vaccinations for other reasons, and they use the religious exemption. And many religions do not favor that exemption. Many religions and leading clergy have come out against that. So I think it's time. Yep.
Okay, Mr. Espinosa, same question?
I think we do need the religious exemption, and quite frankly, another thing that I have come to learn is that for folks that are on Husky insurance or other things like that, if you were to get rid of a religious exemption, and even though they wouldn't feel comfortable vaccinating their children, they would have to have them vaccinated because they would lose their insurance. Also, the CDC came out with a statistic saying that amongst African American males, they found with other vaccinations, if you were to refer to, I believe it was House Bill 5044, it sterilized males. And quite frankly, this is something that is quite concerning for me, and I think it's quite concerning for certain communities.
Mr. Ryan?
Well, I am a member of the Public Health Committee, and I did sit through the public hearings on this particular issue. The fact of the matter is, there is no religion, to our knowledge, except maybe Christian Scientists, that actually don't allow you to get vaccines. The medical exemptions seem to address many of the issues that people who came forward at the hearing had. And the issue isn't so much the fact that they are making a decision for their own children, but they're also making a decision for other children that come in contact with their child, and then to the various families that those children come in contact with. And that's why a religious exemption would probably have an adverse effect on the herd immunity that we possess, the kind of has kept us all safe. Most of us are sitting in this room probably due to the fact that we took vaccines, our parents took vaccines, and has saved us from a lot of pain and sickness in the past. So that's what's important about that. It has more of an effect on the healthcare at large as opposed to just the immediate individual and the family. Medical exemptions are available. I mean, people had unfortunately have a fear because of some really bad science done a few years ago that people kind of caught on to. The vaccines caused problems for their children, and most of those studies have been shown to be false and been debunked.
Okay, is there any rebuttal or extension on this? Yes, Mr. Espinosa.
Well, if you actually met with a few families that were at those hearings, and some of the stories I heard were very tragic. One family almost lost their daughter from a vaccination. And just to set the record, they are not anti-vaxxers. I believe in vaccines. They also believe in vaccines. It's just the fact that all children are different, and all of our bodies respond differently. And being a minority, to hear the science being different, I question that.
Okay, anything
When it comes to
further, Mr. Ryan or Ms. Donnelly?
Yeah, I do think the medical exemptions cover an unfortunate situation like that.
All right. Next question goes to Mr. Espinosa first. Since many families have experienced job loss and loss of their health insurance, what is your plan to ensure that community-based health centers remain affordable?
Well, we do have programs like Access Health Connecticut and other programs such as that would go in and step in, so that way people always have health care. And quite frankly, I'd support those programs and also look into other programs that support it. Don't have too much information on that topic. However, I can attain more information and get back to you at a different time.
Okay, Mr. Ryan?
Well, I actually have worked at a community health center in Bridgeport for a number of years. And I know how vital they are to communities, and we have our own in this particular area that are important and vital here, and I've helped them get some of the resources that they require to be able to add to their infrastructure, and as well as being able to provide care to the folks in the community that need their help. They're a very vital element within our community and have to be maintained. We've worked hard to get them the reimbursement rates that they require to be able to provide the services that they provide to the people that they provide. Some of these people can be very fragile and don't have ready access to other sources of health care. So it's important to them. And as part of this, quite honestly, is a lot of community health centers are also involved with school-based health centers, which really make health care available to kids who can access it readily within the school setting, which can be really important with parents working, things of that nature, to make sure that they get the health care that they need.
Ms. Donnelly?
Yeah, I agree. I think community health centers are one of the great assets that we have in Connecticut. I do feel, though, the Eastern Connecticut funding, especially for issues like mental health, seems to be a bit lower than other parts of Connecticut. So I would definitely want to make sure that they're adequately funded and that we meet regularly with the providers of healthcare in these community health centers to make sure that they have the resources they need to provide good health care. And I also think that, especially during COVID, so many people are losing their health insurance, that we have to make sure that the Husky program is very easy to get on. I know that I knocked on a lot of doors from while campaigning. And several people would tell me they lost their Husky health insurance, or they've lost their insurance through their job and they don't know what to do. So I think we can do a much better job of making people in our communities aware of these health centers, aware of the services they provide, and also aware that there are safety nets for people who need insurance, and that they can access that health insurance easily and quickly to make sure that their families are covered for health care.
Okay, thank you all. Any rebuttal or extension on this question? Hearing none. We are now at the point where we go to closing statements. And by luck of the draw, it starts with Mr. Ryan first.
Again, I want to thank you all for being here this evening and giving me this opportunity to address the important issues of this election with you. Thank the Norwich NAACP, the League of Women Voters, and the students, like I said, that are here this evening. I've had experience in business, healthcare, and education, and it's given me the background that I'm able to have to deal with the issues that are important to us in this region. I've had extensive experience in remedying constituent issues with the knowledge on how to navigate the government at the state and local level to help solve people's problems, such as we recently had to do with a lot of folks that were having difficulties with unemployment insurance. As we just talked about, people were losing their jobs due to the pandemic, and they were having trouble navigating that system to ensure that they had the resources to be able to provide for their family. I've served on the Montville Board of Education and worked in a public health clinic, and it's helped me to understand the workings of those two entities as well. My family owned a small business in Uncasville for 30 years. That helps me to understand the difficulties that small businesses endure and the value that they bring to the business community. I've worked to make the state more business-friendly by supporting the repeal of the business entity tax, expanding the angel investor tax credit, and other tax credits so industry can grow in our state. This has helped in encouraging economic growth in southeastern Connecticut. In representing all the people of the district, I have been able to negotiate elements of state legislation with members of both parties, resulting in legislation which works for the benefit of the general public of my district and the state as a whole. Due to my tenure in the General Assembly, I've been able to provide the resources, and I'll stop.
I'm sorry, that's time. All right, Ms. Donnelly.
Yeah, hi. Thank you again for having us here. I really enjoy the questions. I enjoy having a youthful audience that are asking such tough and good and important questions. I've been an activist my whole life, a community activist, and worked towards issues of social justice, women's equity, LGBTQ rights, and did a lot of conflict resolution and diversity training in my local schools around where I live. I feel very strongly that that we need to transition towards more youth being elected, and that it's really important to hand down that mantle of leadership to people. So I encourage everyone to run for Board of Ed, to run for local elections, just to be part and active. And I can see by your attendance here tonight that you all are. So I encourage you to vote if you can, get your parents to vote, get everybody to vote. I'm a small business owner. I have 3 children. I worked on the Board of Education for over 20 years. I'm very passionate about education, equity in our state. As you have seen, I'm very passionate about climate and saving our environment. I think we live in one of the most beautiful parts of the state and the country, and I want to preserve that for everyone. So, thank you.
Thank you in time. Mr. Espinosa.
Well, I just want to thank the 2 other candidates that are here tonight, and I want to thank the League of Women's Voters and the NFA debate team and the NAACP. Just a little family history. My great-grandfather was the first to immigrate to this country from Cuba in '49. He's born in Jamaica and adopted to a Cuban family. On my mother's side, my grandmother and my mother came in '65. It was the last flight out from what Castro had told them. And they immigrated to America to fulfill the American dream. And they did. And they fought racism. They fought not being able to speak English. And they had a lot of hardships. And my great-grandfather in the 60s was very active with civil rights, with Martin Luther King and other movements and the NAACP. I would love to continue on his legacy as a state representative. And also a little information about me. I'm 20 years old. I serve in the Army National Guard as a truck driver. I volunteer as a firefighter at Mohegan Fire Company. I technically already am serving my community and my country. I want to go the step further and serve as a state representative. I also want to thank Mr. Ryan here. He's had 28 years of service. He was first elected to the House of Representatives in 1992. And he has been up there, and he's done a lot, and, well, there's some things we could disagree on.
Okay.
And I just
Time.
want to thank everybody for coming out tonight.
Thank you all. Thanks to all the candidates. Thank you also to the timers who did an excellent job, to the NAACP, the League of Women Voters of Southeastern Connecticut. Ladies and gentlemen who are watching this, it's up to you. Vote November 3rd. Thank you.
Or now.